Europe. France. Paris. July 25, 2000, Charles de Gaulle Airport. 12:30 in the afternoon. 100 men, women and children check in for flight AF45. Concorde is a plane like no other. Elegant, luxurious, and above all, super fast. Flying at more than 2,200 kilometers per hour, Concorde links North America to London or Paris in 3 3/4 hours. Concorde's unique shape, with a pencil-thin cabin and vast delta wings, enable her to race across the sky at 3 kilometers every 6 seconds. John Hutchinson has flown Concorde for 15 years.
Best way of describing it is simply to say that it was a thoroughbred. It was a beautiful, responsive, powerful airplane.
By 1:30, all of the passengers are checked in for their supersonic trip. The pilot, Captain Christian Marty, is already in the cockpit preparing for the flight. The holidaymakers are in good hands. 54-year-old Marty is one of Air France's most experienced.
The Concorde is one of the most beautiful planes I've ever seen. The line is pure. I really like to watch this plane landing, taking off.
After 40,000 flights and 900,000 flying hours, there's never been a fatality. At 4:35 in the afternoon, Concorde is ready to depart. Anticipation on board mounts as the supersonic jet taxis to the runway. For senior pilot John Hutchinson, a moment like this is always special.
As you open the throttles up to full power, you'd feel this huge surge of power in the small of your back as the airplane accelerates down the runway, and you just get the feeling that the one thing the airplane wants to do at that point is to get into the air as quickly as possible, into its natural environment.
In the control tower, Gilles Augelin monitors the takeoff.
I was watching the Concorde gaining power on the runway because it was so nice to see that. It's a very heavy plane, so you know at the beginning is quite slow, then you gain the speed.
Concorde accelerates down the 4,000-meter runway. It passes through 320 kilometers per hour. Using computer graphics, we recreate what happens next. For Gilles Augelin, it's a moment of sheer horror.
Suddenly, I saw a flame just behind the body of the aircraft. So I jumped on my mic to say, Air France 4590, you have flames behind you.
Captain Marty cannot see the flames, but accelerating through 328 kilometers per hour, Concorde is committed to the takeoff. There are only 2,000 meters of runway left, but Concorde needs 3,000 meters to have any chance of stopping safely.
After the speed, whatever is the situation, the plane has to take off. It could not avoid the takeoff. And as I was watching the flames, I saw the nose of the Concorde lifting up.
At 4:43 and 15 seconds, Captain Marty pulls on the control stick. Concorde takes to the air. This is how Concorde flight AF4590 appears to witnesses.
In flames.
The dreads. Gilles Augelin reaches for his mic.
I've called the Air France and I said, Air France 4590, do you hear me?
Air France 4590, me recevez-vous?
I said it twice.
Air France 4590, me recevez-vous?
There was no answer.
The supersonic jet, loaded with fuel and 109 people on board, crashes right on top of a hotel on the outskirts of Gonesse. A terrifying fireball tears through the building. This 43-centimeter mystery strip of metal. When you match the 43-centimeter strip of metal to the damage on Concorde's tire, it's a perfect fit. Suddenly, the whole inquiry now depends on the source of this metal. Where did it come from? It takes 5 weeks of painstaking detective work, comparing it to the thousands of parts that make up aircraft. Then, a breakthrough. They discover the metal strip comes from the engine mounting of a DC-10. The flight log from Paris reveals a Continental Airlines DC-10 took off 5 minutes before Concorde. Investigators now have a very strong theory about how the strip of metal contributed to the crash. Our graphics can simulate a virtual camera on the runway to reveal the cause of the accident. As the plane hurtles down the runway, a rogue strip of metal bursts a tire. 81 seconds before the crash, a heavy chunk of rubber flies into the fuel tanks. Fuel cascades over the engines. Not enough on its own to cause a catastrophe, it needs a spark. The most likely explanation can be seen in this computer simulation. Shrapnel from the burst tire flies up into the landing gear bay, where it severs power cables. The undercarriage is now stuck in the down position. Worse still, the exposed wires are whipping around in the gale force airflow. If the exposed wires make contact, they'll spark. As fate would have it, they do. That contact ignites the leaking fuel, and at that moment, Concorde becomes a flying bomb. We can now tell you what it must have been like for Captain Marty in the cockpit. From the pilot's seat, he can't see the flames. All he knows is that Concorde is losing power in engine number 2 just at the moment of takeoff. 1 second later, the control tower alerts him to the fire.
Aircon 4590, you have flames behind you.
Computer graphics show how Concorde would have looked. Now, to make matters even worse for Captain Marty, the number 1 engine is losing power as well. Events are conspiring against him. Aviation safety expert David Learmount explains why.
There was a fantastic gush of fuel out of this quite large hole. It was literally drowning out that engine, which gradually lost power and finally went out. So the pilots were left with 2 engines when they're normally accustomed to having 4.
Engine fire alarm sounds. And 3 seconds later, the captain shuts down engine number 2.
The drill for a fire warning is that you shut the engine down and cut off the supply of fuel to it to try and then fire the fire extinguisher for that engine to try and...
Captain Marty tries to fly the crippled plane to the nearest runway at Le Bourget Airport, just 5 kilometers ahead. But there's a new problem.
Pilot's essential controls were being destroyed.
At the same time, the wheels are disintegrating. "33 seconds. The engine fire alarm sounds again and remains on for the duration of the flight. Captain Marty runs out of options. Even the runway at Le Bourget, now only 3 kilometers away, is out of reach. With just 11 seconds left. The control tower hears Christian Marty's final words. Too late. No time. On the 24th of October 2003, Concorde carries passengers for the last time. The first era of supersonic passenger travel is at an end. Concorde is now just a museum relic.